Hi everyone, this is Rob with the Umass A+D Architecture and Design Digital Fabrication Lab, and we're going to be looking into interior rendering today using the VRay plugin for Rhinoceros. So exterior renders are pretty straightforward, and the VRay interface, which I'm going to assume that you're familiar with, the VRay is a pretty powerful external renderer, and if I just do a quick render here, this is a little building module that I've created. You can see that I'm pretty quickly getting some nice shadow casting, some nice contrast in here, and I can pretty quickly adjust those settings to do exterior renderings. However, interior renderings tend to be a little bit trickier. So today I'm going to go through how to set everything up, and how to apply some materials, and all of the different settings that you'll need to produce a pretty high quality render of an interior space pretty quickly. Okay, so there are a few things that we're going to do just to get everything set up. So one is we're going to apply a sun, a VRay sun, and you can use the native sun system in Rhino, but I find that the VRay sun system works really quite well, and it's more or less the same interface. So we're going to go ahead and use that. Okay, so click on this icon up here, sunlight indicator, and I'm just going to set my sun here. And actually these settings look pretty good. I'm going to start with kind of a southwestern sun at kind of a medium altitude, and that looks pretty good. Then I'm going to put it somewhere where I'll be able to get access to it, somewhere where I can see it. It won't appear in the render, of course, so it doesn't really matter where it is. You just want to make sure that you can go back and find it later if you need to change it. Okay, so the next thing is, and I'm going to just show you really quickly on an exterior render here. If I do a render, I'm going to get actually lighting from two suns, and that's going to show up as two separate shadows. It's not really showing so much in this render, but you will actually get two shadows. So what we need to do is we need to tell VRay to ignore its sort of default sunlight system and pay attention only to our sunlight system that we've established here. So to do that, you're going to go into the VRay options menu over here, and you're going to go to environment. So right now you have two maps, one for your general illumination, which is your skylight, and the other is for your background. So the general illumination is sort of what it sounds like, a general illumination. It applies light kind of evenly throughout the entire model, and it's based on a sun system. And so right now that sun system is that default sun, but we need to tell it to pay attention to our sun so that it's coming from a location and a direction that we want. The background is a similar system, but that's actually the background itself. So, and it also casts shadows on the same, based on that same default VRay sun. So to change the sun system, you're going to click on this capital M, which is the map. Come over here to sunlight source and click on default, and then you can select this one, which is sun. That's our sun that we just did. So do that, and then make sure that this box here is unchecked, override sun's parameters. You want to just be able to adjust the sun using its built-in commands in the Rhino interface. Click apply, come down to background, and you're going to do the exact same thing. Click on default and go to sun, apply, uncheck the override sun's parameters, and click apply. So as you can see, I'll just go right back into that. Right now our system, our lighting system, is set to sky, and that's how we want it. And so it's going to apply a pretty good natural daylight system, and now you'll see that the sun is coming solely from our one source of sunlight, and those shadows are going to come from always the same direction, exactly where we want them to be. So even if I rotate around, instead of it coming from right over our shoulder, which is the default sunlight system, now it's going to come from this direction. So that'll give us a little more control over those settings. Okay, so the next thing whenever you're setting up a rendering is to set up the view. So I'm going to close these two windows here, and we're going to set up a quick view. So I've already got one sort of picked out here. I'm going to navigate right to it. But what you want to look for in a view is really looking for something that feels proportional, that shows what you want to show. You can play with, over here, the lens length. 25 feels pretty appropriate, but if it's a longer shot, you might want a if you want to focus in on one area, you might want a longer lens length. If you really want a wide angle lens, then you can drop that down a bit. But 25 feels pretty good, so I'm going to set up a view. It's looking pretty good. I hold down Shift to pan, and Control and Alt will just rotate my view and keep my camera in place. So I'm going to set up a view looking outwards towards the front of my building, and I'm going to make sure that it's set up so that the camera is located and looking at a point that's at about head height, and that's going to make it feel like a more natural render setup. And I'm also going to hold down Control and right click to zoom in a little bit. I'm going to try to get rid of that door frame right there and bring this up a little bit. Okay, so I think that's pretty good. I'm going to do that, and I'm going to just save it as a named view. So type named. So bring up the named view menu here, and I'm going to save it as example 1. Perfect. There we go. And so that way I can get back to it. So even if I change this, just double click on that, it'll bring me. Oops. Should bring me right back there. Oh, you know, it's got an animation on it, so I'm just going to turn that off. Double click. Nope, not sure what it's doing right now. Okay, let's go ahead and get out of that. I'm going to just go ahead and let it finish here. So you can animate your views, and you can actually record views, but we're not going to go into that at all today. Okay, so to turn that off, I'm gonna, yep, that's off now. So now if I just double click on this, it'll restore it. There we go. So that's how it should be working for you. Don't play with animation, it's not worth it for now. Okay. So again, yeah, I can get back to that view if I need to. And now I'm going to do a quick render here, and you're going to see that I have a couple issues. One, and this becomes immediately apparent, is that my windows, these blue surfaces here, are not transparent right now. So rather than applying a transparent material just to get the settings right quickly, I'm going to go ahead and just turn off that layer. And that'll let in most of the light. Well, all of the light that would come through the window. So then when I render it again, you'll see I'll get a lot better illumination. And so this is just using the basic default settings. And I'm not going to let this finish rendering, but you'll notice if you do let it finish rendering that you'll end up with some blotchiness, and that just has to do with the rendering engine that's selected. And so right now the settings are on irradiance map and deterministic Monte Carlo irradiance, which is a different system, and they're fairly appropriate for outdoor spaces, but for indoor spaces we're going to use a different system. So I'm going to show you how to select that. So I'm going to go back to VRay options here, and I'm going to go down to this menu item here, Indirect Illumination, which I want to have on, and I'm going to set the first one to deterministic Monte Carlo, and I'm going to set the second one to this one, which is called Light Cache. And Light Cache is great for interior spaces, and I'm not going to go into how they work, but you can look it up online. And this is actually probably the most powerful tool for interior renders. It just works. And I found that there are a lot of tutorials that say that irradiance map is the best one for interior renders. I found that deterministic Monte Carlo gives me a much cleaner result, and it's actually quite quick. But actually, you know, for sampling, for setting things up, the irradiance map is actually quite effective, and it's a little bit quicker. So when you're getting the rendering set up, that's actually a good setting. So maybe we'll go with that at first, and then at the end we're going to switch it back to deterministic Monte Carlo, and that'll get rid of some blotches that you might see that tend to show up. Okay, there's a couple other settings that I'm going to change here off of the basic settings. One, if you come into let's see, if you come into camera, you're going to notice that this box is probably checked, vignetting. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. That's kind of dark corners around the edges, and you can do that in Photoshop, but you want to have kind of a more raw image to start with. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I've got my got my indirect illumination all set up, and let's do another quick test render here. And I'm working with the smallest settings here, and that allows me to kind of pop out quick renders. Okay, now I just want to quickly draw your attention over here. So it says it's building a light cache, but if we look in here, you can see that all of the pixels are already illuminated. I'm going to go ahead and cancel this and do it one more time. I want you to pay attention to the point at which the bar is at in that building light cache phase when all of these pixels become white. So let's take a look, or become filled in. So it looks like maybe right about now it looks pretty good. So that's at about 25% of this light cache setting. So then the rest of this time, the way that light cache works is it's a series of bounces. So it's just continuing to bounce, and all of the light from every surface that's visible has already made it to the camera by the time that this bar reaches 25%, which means that it's working at 400 times the required level. So I'm going to go into light cache, and right now the subdivisions here are set to 1,000. I'm going to drop that down to, I'm going to be a little conservative and go to 300, and that's going to let us do much faster test renders. So let's go ahead and do that, and you'll see now this building light cache phase is much shorter, and you'll see pretty quickly that it doesn't really make too much of a difference in terms of the illumination. Okay, so there are a few things going on here. One, this is pretty washed out. So let's just turn down the light settings a little bit, and I think we'll get a better result. So the best way to do that, or one of the ways to do that, is to adjust the f-stop, and that's under the camera menu here. I'm going to increase the f-stop up to, let's see how 10 looks. Do another quick test render, and you can see these are going quite quickly, which allows us to just sort of get a good feel of how the lighting is doing. Okay, so that's getting a little bit better. I'm going to just try bringing it up to 11 and see here. We'd like to have mostly medium tones, some darker areas, some lighter areas. You also find that in general, when you apply materials, you're going to get a lot more contrast. So right now, we're looking at some fairly medium tones, a little bit of highlight where the sunlight is hitting, but we have some pretty good illumination on these interior spaces that are not directly lit. So that's looking pretty good. I'm gonna just hold on to these settings for now, and I'm gonna show you guys quickly how to apply some materials, and that's gonna change the illumination. So we're gonna have to go back and check again later. But now we have sort of our basic settings here. Okay, so let's see. The first one we'll just turn our windows back on, and I'm going to encourage you in general to apply materials by layer, so that as you create new objects in your Rhino world, they'll get the same material as everything else of that same category. So that would mean that you would have to break up your windows into windows and mullions and so on and so forth. So it does require a little bit more upfront work, but if you're going to be doing renderings anyway, it's really worth the time to do it. Okay, so to bring up the material menu, what you're going to do is just double click over here in this kind of empty space underneath material, and then we're going to click on this button here, plugin. First we're actually going to just do windows. So this is actually going to be just a really quick Rhino material. I'm just going to show you really quickly how to do this. So we're going to go ahead and click maybe kind of a turquoise color. We'll give a little bit of tint to the windows, mostly gray, maybe a little bit of blue somewhere in there. That's looking pretty good. Click OK. Then we're going to increase our transparency to roughly 90 to 95%, somewhere in there. And you can also increase the reflectivity to really anywhere but roughly 50%. And let's bring the gloss finish up to maybe 30%. Now, hopefully that won't give us any wild reflections, but we can take a quick look. Okay. And your IOR. Typical IOR for Windows is actually 1.55. So go ahead and set that to 1.55. That's the incidence of refraction. That'll just give you a more realistic looking window. Click OK, and let's do another quick test render. See how everything's looking here. Okay, looking pretty good. So that's going to just give a slight tint to everything that's outside. So when you render this and you use a transparent background, whatever you set behind here will have just a slight bluish tint, which will give it a nice character. So that's good. I've got my windows, and you can see it hasn't really changed the interior lighting conditions too much. Okay, so I'm going to close that, and let's apply some more material. So now I'm going to show you how to set a material using VRay. Okay, so again, I'm going to double click on material. Now I'm going to click that plugin box, that radio button, and click OK. Okay, now I'm going to go down here to VRay Material Editor. And so right now I've got a default material here. I'm just going to go ahead and use this one. So under default material, go to diffuse. I'm going to change the color here. So right now it's kind of a gray color. I'm going to just bring it up a little bit and give it just the slightest tan tone here. And that's going to be my interior wall. It's just kind of a warm white color. Click OK, and I'm going to go ahead and rename that interior walls, and click save that. Okay, now when I go ahead and close that, can come back over here, double click on materials, click plugin, and then click browse. And now you'll see here that I have this option for interior walls. I'm going to click apply and click OK. Go back down here to exterior walls, and I'm just going to also make those that same color. So go ahead to plugin, go to browse, interior walls. We're just going to use the same color. It doesn't matter too much for these purposes. Click OK. And for one more, there's this green surface here. This is what I've called a railing. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing there. So click on plugin, browse to interior walls, click apply. Okay? So you can see that by creating that material, it's then very easy to apply it to a lot of different surfaces. Now I'm going to do another quick test render. We'll see how that's looking. So that color is going to be more or less the same. Yep, it's looking pretty much the same. I'm just going to check on something. So this may come up. When you click on your, yep, okay, so here we go. So here's the problem. So right now, my materials are set by object, but what I actually want them to be set by is layer. So I'm going to just go ahead and click cell all, or type cell all. It's going to select all of my objects. I'm going to come over here and do assign material by layer. That's going to allow me to adjust all those materials just right in this menu over here. Okay, now I'm going to do another quick render, and let's see if that changes anything. Okay, now we're getting a little bit of a darker interior. I had a feeling that those windows weren't applying quite right. Now you can start to see there's a little bit of tonal quality to these walls. I'm liking that. That's good. Okay. So now generally I can apply all my materials by layer here. So that's good. Okay. Now I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna create a VRay material that is going to use a bitmap. Now bitmap is just like an image that is displayed on the surface of the material. Okay, but here's how to create a new VRay material. This is your scene materials. You're going to right click on that and click add material. And go to add VRay material. Okay, I'm going to rename it. We're going to call it, I'm going to do one for the wood surfaces. So I'm going to call this wood. And that's going to be my furniture, these brown surfaces. I have a cabinet and some shelving and a table. Okay, so come to diffuse, and I'm going to click on this little lowercase m. So that means there is no map applied, but if you have a capital M, that means there is a map. Okay, so click on that. I'm going to come over here and go to bitmap. And then I'm going to go in one more level here, click on this M again, and I'm going to bring up materials menu. So now I've got some materials saved on my desktop. I'm just going to use one. You guys can start to build up a materials library. VRay has a default default material library, and it's pretty good, but you can also start to build up a much stronger catalog of materials. Okay, so I'm going to just pick wood material. We'll go ahead with this one, just a kind of a basic generic wood grain, and I'm going to click update. Let's see how it's looking. Okay, that looks pretty good, and I'm going to apply. And then I'm going to come over here again, click on material, click on plugin, or browse, and click on wood this time. Apply, okay, render. Okay, so now it looks like it's selected all of those objects and it's applied my wood material to it. You can now see that the colors are looking a lot better in this. The tonal quality, I'm getting a lot more shadows, highlights, and lowlights, and a lot more contrast. And that's because I'm applying materials, darker materials, that are sucking up some of that light. So starting with a good medium light, that's always a good place to start. And from that point, we can start to adjust everything. Okay, so this is looking good. I'm going to apply another quick Rhino material to my ceiling here. So I've got that right here, and so I'm going to click on that. Let's give it a little bit of a darker gray color. Click OK, and I'm not going to give it any special finish. And we'll just click OK, and give it another quick render. That should give us a little more darkness in that ceiling there. And I've got that's in particular these sort of pod areas that are dropping down here. Okay, so now I'm getting some nice kind of balanced tonal quality in here. I'm liking this. Okay, but the next thing that we're going to do, we're going to apply one more VRay material, but this time we're going to give it just a little bit of texture, and I'm going to show you why in a minute. Okay, so come back into my VRay material editor here. I'm going to add one more material, so right click on scene materials, add material, add VRay material, and let's go back into diffuse, click on M. Okay, so now I have a material that is a floor tile, so I'm going to go ahead and use that one, and let me locate it here. Yeah, well, let's go with this one. This is kind of a flagstone. So you know what, we'll do this. We'll do this kind of rougher floor tile system, which is probably not the most appropriate surface for this interior space, but it'll serve nicely for showing how to apply this sort of more textured material. Okay, click apply, and I'm going to run off a quick test render, and you're going to see pretty quickly that there's an issue here. So right now, you'll notice on this floor, which I have completely forgotten to apply to the material here. Come over here, click on materials, go to plugin, browse, and I forgot to rename that, but it's default material. Click apply, okay. I'm going to just come back over here and rename that. You can always come over here and do that later. I'm going to call it floor. Okay. Run off a quick test render. And you're going to see, so this is a big issue. So right now, it's only creating one or two sets of tiles. So it's this sort of massive tile surface, which of course is totally unrealistic. Actually, you want something that's sort of more to scale with reality. So let's go ahead and set that up. And also, you know what? It's applied it to my ceiling here, so that's not going to work either. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and change this back to default material, and this is the process. It can take a little while, and you're going to run into these exact same issues. So this time I'm going to come over here, and this is where sometimes it's useful to actually apply materials by object instead of layer. So come over here to your materials menu and click on object. Now I can click on plugin and go to browse and set that back to the floor. Apply. Okay. Now I'm going to show you quickly how to do texture mapping, and that's going to fix that issue where the floor tiles are out of scale. So that's this menu over here. Click on texture mapping, and so you saw that it was probably about one one repeat of the surface all the way across this plane here. And so I want to probably divide that by about 10. Whoop. So, okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you that one more time. You're going to come over here and click on Apply Planar Mapping, and click. And so what you're going to do is you can actually draw out your areas. Then that's sort of the defining area of your surface, so that you can place your repeats quite precisely using that technique. But instead of that, we're just going to use bounding box, which is going to give us our entire object. So just type B, hit enter, and we're going to orient that surface relative to the world. So W, enter. And then we want to just use a UV mapping, not UVW. So U, enter. Okay, so now that's applied to planar mapping. And now we can come over here and we can actually start to adjust these settings. So right now you can see it's only applying one instance of that bitmap over the entire surface of this floor. But actually we want it to apply probably about 15 to 20 versions of that texture in both the U and V direction, so X and Y direction. So I'm going to come over here and adjust that using the UVW repeat setting here, and I'm going to just change that to 15. Click tab and it'll apply it to the U, the V, and the W direction, and run off another quick test render. Let's see how that floor is looking now. Much more appropriately sized here. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to accept that, so that's pretty good. But now what I'm going to do is go into options, and I'm going to show you the other issue that comes up when you start to apply materials. And I'm going to show you quickly how to deal with that. Okay, so our output right now is quite small. It's 320 by 240. I'm going to bring that up to 1024 by 768. So that's a much higher resolution. But I'm not going to do a full render. What I'm going to do is what's called a render window. So you go to the VRay menu, or the VRay render icon here, and instead of left clicking, you're going to right click. Then I'm just going to select this area of the floor, and it's going to do a pretty high quality render of just that area, so I can start to see what's going on just in this area, and it won't render the outside area, which will save me some time. Okay, so now you can see that while the scale on these tiles, which are pretty horrible, is fairly accurate, it has this sort of flat quality to it, and so you can fix that pretty quickly. I'm going to show you how. Okay, and the other thing is I've got this rug icon item here. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. I've got it on a layer, so that'll get rid of that. Okay, so going back into my VRay material editor and clicking on floor, I can come into maps here, and you have a few different options here. But I'm going to click on a bump map, and that's going to give just a little bit of texture to that surface and give it just a little bit more of a realistic image. So this is, for a really finished render, this is nothing that you would ever want to spend time on just for sort of a working render. But if you're looking to produce finished materials, then this might be worth your time. So I'm going to set it to a bitmap and then load that exact same image, the stone flags. Click open. And so right now the multiplier is set to 1. I have a feeling that's going to be too high, but let's just do a quick render window again, and we'll look down here. And so now you can see, as compared to this area right to the side here, I've got a little bit more texture in here. And that's actually looking pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and just do a little bit of a larger test window here. Let's see what we've got. You'll notice that it'll start to catch the light in different ways, and that's really what you're looking for. So that can be it can be a pretty effective tool. That starts to give it more of an actual stone texture. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to just show you really quickly. So if you want to change that texture, you don't have to create a whole new material. So right now that stone's just killing me, so I'm going to go ahead and change that. Go back to materials, and let's see, I think I've got a nice material somewhere in here let's see, I think it might be in textures. Let's see, I've got a pretty nice concrete panel here. So these are sort of cast in place panels. It looks a little more appropriate. I'm gonna use that one and click apply. I'm gonna have to come back in here and navigate to that same menu. Let's do that. Materials, there it is. Cast in place. Open that up. Okay, now, and I have a feeling that's gonna change my spacing, but let's just see how it looks here. Oh, now you can see it's already doing a full render. So I'm going to go ahead and close that, right click, and again just do, right click and do a render window. Take a look just at that bottom area. Let's see what the scale is. So that's looking pretty good. It's looking like kind of a smaller textured tile. And that looks pretty good. I think I'll accept that, and you can see with the bump it gives it a nice texture. That's looking a little strong right now, so maybe I'll come in here to adjust that bump. You're going to adjust the multiplier, and so maybe I'll make it 0.5. That'll really tone that down a lot. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Do one more. I'm going to actually bring up the options menu and do kind of a medium-sized full, do an 800 by 600. Do a medium-sized full render. And we can just take a look at how the lighting is doing, and also look at what I can already tell is going to be an issue. There are going to be some blotches in our final image. So I'm going to show you quickly how to take care of that. Actually the tonal quality is looking pretty good. But what can happen is you can end up with some pretty heavily blotchy sections when you do an interior render. It'll look like these sort of darker dots, and they show up on the walls. Yeah, you can see over here there's sort of this blotch going on. And so you remember at the beginning when we chose our illumination, our general illumination system, yeah, and it's particularly bad on the ceiling, as it usually is. When we did that illumination system, we decided that our indirect illumination, we decided that we were going to use a radiance map. But remember I said deterministic Monte Carlo gives you a much smoother finish in general. So I'm going to select that one instead. You're going to notice it's going to take a little bit longer to do a full render here. Because DMCI just takes a little bit longer. It's a slower process. But the final result tends to be a lot better. I'm going to show you another trick here. You can click on this button, track mouse while rendering. And if you want to look at just one particular area of a render first, you can move the mouse to that area and it'll render that first. So right now I just want to see if that ceiling is looking a little bit less blotchy. Let's take a look. And DMCI tends to be a little bit less crisp, but I find that that's a worthwhile trade-off in general. And you can actually adjust the quality settings on DMCI in the VRay options menu over here. You can increase these subdivisions if you have the time to wait around and see what a final result might look like at a higher setting. But in general, I find that I'd rather have a little bit of grain than have to wait forever for a render. So, but it's definitely an available option. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. If I was doing a series of test renders, I would probably let this render all the way out and just take a look at everything, make sure everything looks pretty good. And then if everything was looking good, I would come back over here. And so there are a couple different things. So one is that you can really get some pretty good adjustment in terms of the screen ratio, the image ratio. And one way to do that, if you want a particularly wide image, you can really actually just open up your viewport, and that's going to give you a wider image. And then what you're going to do is click on the setting that you want. So we'll do this largest one, and then I'm going to do get image aspect, or get view aspect. That'll bring in this image aspect into here, and I can click L. So then I'm going to get a render. Oops. get a render of exactly the view that I want there. Click on this undo view change, I'll bring me back to the last view. So I'm going to be getting a render of exactly this viewport. So that can be, that's usually a good idea. And also, if you decide that you want to overlay any line work over your rendering, that's the best way to line it up, is you export the viewport from your Make 2D effect and also from this render, and make sure that you're always using that viewport, the entire extent of your viewport, and then those two images will line up. Okay, so I'm going to render everything, and this one's going to take a lot longer, and this is a pretty large image. So at 150 dpi, 2000 pixels, you're looking at about 24 inches wide. So this is a 2 foot wide rendering. That's a pretty substantial rendering, and can usually cross over, you know, an arc D board from one side to the other. So you're never really going to need images that are much larger than that. The maximum you would ever really want to render is a 3600 image, and that 3600 pixel image, and that's just absolutely massive. And that would be if that's kind of the main subject of a very large board. But in general, this is kind of the maximum you would ever want to go for. Okay, well, this has been Rob with the UMass Architecture and Design Digital Fabrication Lab, and this has been a VRay tutorial. Today we've covered how to set up an interior render, how to place a sun and set the environmental sunlight so that they're working on your sun, how to set up a view and select the correct interior rendering engines, both for setting up your render and for a final render, high quality render. And we've also looked at how to do test renders and how to set materials both in VRay and in Rhino itself. So I hope this tutorial has been helpful. I'm going to let this render out and I'll post it at the end of the video. Okay.